So obviously, like any single page application has challenges with web crawlers and stuff because it's just JavaScript. It's not rendered server side. And in my other video about Flutter SEO, I kind of look at this manual way of doing it that essentially what it does is you create a Firebase. And this is meant to work with Firebase because there's no reason not to host this on Firebase. It's a perfect place to host a Flutter app, web Flutter app. And you have, your this is like your standard Firebase hosting JSON minus everything and rewrites here. And basically what you do is you set these rewrites so if someone comes to dashboard/categories directly, we call, instead of just like serving the app as normal, we actually call this Firebase function here. And definitely like watch that video if you actually want to kind of know the in-depth stuff going on. But it's really tedious. Like it's tedious to write this stuff out. And then for every single thing that you want to permalink, you actually have to go and in your, there's a Firebase folder or functions folder. This is Firebase specific. And you actually have to go in and create in your index.js all these really tedious things. And just to walk you through really what happens here. So for instance, categories, which is when anyone comes to dashboard/categories. First of all, we read the index.html just to have it in case we need it. And that's the actual like Flutter's, generated index.html. And part of this build process is it copies the most up-to-date ones. You don't have something out of sync. And it gets the URL and essentially figures out some things. And then it tries to detect if it's a bot. And that's using something called bot detector because we only care for SEO if it's a bot. We'll just, and essentially if it's not a bot, after this, all it's going to return is that HTML anyway. So nothing really happens with the function other than a quick like, okay, boom, fire off. But when it is a bot, basically what we do is we set in all these lovely variables for like our OG and our description and our keywords and even some like H1, H2, like paragraph stuff, whatever we need to do so that a bot, whether it's Facebook, Google, whatever, can actually get context in here. So that's pretty cool. But this this is terrible. Like imagine having to do this and maintain this for 50 different pages as well as like dynamic pages. Like it's almost impossible. So I'm not going to dig like into everything going on, but essentially the implementation side of it is inside inside here we have where is it? I think it's in config SEO SEO.dart. Okay, and I might move this somewhere else, but it works. And basically, you would configure, and this could also technically come from an env file, but I just did it here. But these are kind of like your default things, like what's the site title, what's the default title if if your page doesn't have it, what's the default description, and what's the default keywords. And this is a model that represents an SEO page, so it has a path, it has a name, title, description, keywords, API URL, some other more complicated stuff. And this is all you have to do. You basically create, now there's a little bit of undryness here. For instance, and it's something I might, find a way to do better. But for reasons I need not to get into now, this is the best way to do it. And basically you just say, okay, this path, dashboard/categories. You need to give it a name. This has to be just unique between these. And this is really just what derives that function name and just keeps everything concise. Then you can give it a title. So I want this, if anyone comes to this page, I want Google to read it as like categories, as well as a description, as well as I can pass in some keywords for that. So that's really cool. And the magic all happens in this thing called Seogenerator.dart. Nope, it does not happen there. There's nothing there. I can delete that file. GenSEO.dart, which this is actually outside of our Flutter source because this is kind of like a tooling system. Basically what it does, this was kind of tedious to write, but now that it's done, it's done. Of course, I can adapt it. But essentially what it does, if we go to the start, and you run this through Dart, like through your command line, you would just go Dart gen SEO. So it's something that in our build script, if you go to the make file, you'll actually see when you run deploy, it first builds, build web, which is this, build web release mode. Then it does this gen SEO, which actually runs Dart tools gen SEO, and then it Firebase deploys. So what actually happens when I run this in the main of this, because this is a main, it is actually going to um, skip over a couple things here, but oh, so it pulls in that SEO routes. And this is luckily something I can access because it's not really Flutter specific. It gets complicated. Like when I was trying to read it originally right from the routes file, but because there's so much deep going into, especially with the generator and stuff, and that file includes all these like things that you don't necessarily have in Dart. But this works because it's just a constant with these Dart models. Like there's nothing Fluttery about this. So we actually are able to pull that into this command line tool essentially. And it goes to the SEO routes, and it actually sort of creates these variables, does some replacements, which I'll get into in a bit. And there's two files that essentially it's going to be modifying here. So one, it needs to keep this thing in sync, which is all of our rewrites. So what's happening here is we're actually just we have this sort of default. This is how how the start of that file works, and then there's rewrites. And then for every one, we need to then generate within hosting rewrites. We need to add this this new thing, which essentially is like that source and path, source function. Yeah, source function. Sorry. And so it essentially does that. And then at the very end of this, you'll see that it actually like writes somewhere. Yeah, writes that that hosting file somewhere. Write as string pre-JSON config. But what it's also doing every time in this loop is generating this this code here, and this is the code that we're injecting in these variables that we have in Dart, but into this big string that ultimately gets concatenated together into our index.js inside our functions, which generates this what could eventually be a very long file. This could also be minified. It doesn't matter. It's running, it's running server side anyways. So, but we could probably clean it up. But the stuff is there. And then something that's cool is we actually have in our debug true or false, and that essentially sets that flag in here of debug bot. So you'll see debug bot is true, which allows us to actually debug this. And I will just kind of show you how this kind of works. So I'm just going to, one sec. I need to find where this is. I think it's like Flutter skeleton. Yeah. So here we go, our normal site, and we can navigate it as normal, whatever. But if a bot comes here, and because I have debug bot on, it will show me how the bot sees it, just for like testing purposes. So if I actually do a hard return here, if I have debug bot off, this will just respond as normal as the Flutter application. But when I have this off or on, we can just kind of preview what the bot is seeing, and it's all this text here. Because ultimately, when a bot comes, we don't even need to serve them the JavaScript. There's no need. All we're really serving them is this metadata, because what this allows us to do is in our Facebook debugger, which is just a good place to test this sort of stuff. We can actually pass this in, and even if in this case, if bot debug was still false, Facebook will get detected as a bot, and it actually goes and look, it pulls in, it knows its categories, it knows the title of it, the list. We could of course have images, all these kinds of things. So that's pretty cool. Now where this gets like super cool is dynamic data. So let me just hopefully I can load this again with yeah. So let's go to, for instance, users and pick key M, whoever that is, and we'll bring this through the debugger. And in fact, actually, because I have debug on, I can just do it here, which is super handy. And you'll see it's actually, whoa, okay, just from knowing user number 36151, it knows the only thing dynamic I'm pulling is their username. But like, how the hell is it doing that? And that's definitely like an extra complication here. But essentially, when you are configuring your SEO, you can pass in optionally an API URL and these like sort of almost like functions to get stuff from your API. So to give you an example, users, we're doing the normal stuff that we've done before, but we're actually passing an API URL, which hits this this API here with this sort of placeholder of ID, and you'll see these correspond. So the code in this Gen SEO knows to look for like a pattern like this and a pattern like this, and essentially it will call that API, and then we have a response to title, which is essentially essentially something that will determine who the what the title should be. And this is an array because I want to be able to do things like without actually passing in a function here. It's kind of just showing you the hierarchy of something. So in this case, it's just like at the top level, when I get this response, there should be a key called username. But in this one, to get their image, I actually have to go, category.image.asset.url. So this would go, deep into that and go. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Definitely check out the code. There's still some more work to do on it. But for instance, if we wanted to test a category, categories, let's just like look at that right now. Oh yeah, because I have debug mode on. So we have to actually go here. Now I realize this actually doesn't go to a unique link, but I happen to know that there is one for this. So category/1. Nope, maybe it wasn't that. Dashboard/categories/ I thought this worked. Okay, something is not right, but that's okay. Oh, wait, what was it? I don't think I actually finished this, but this worked at one point because this should be going /category. Anyways, I'm not gonna worry about it, but that's kind of the approach, so that you can actually have your bots read a Flutter app, which I think is a big thing standing in the way of Flutter, becoming really mature for web. Now, I do want to reiterate that I don't think Flutter is the best choice for a website. As I've said many times before, it's definitely really good for web apps. So, building something like Spotify in Flutter to me makes perfect sense. It'll work on all these devices as well as web, but it's not really like an informational site that you need to worry about, all this accessibility. I mean, accessibility is still fine in Flutter, but I mean like highlighting text and stuff. It's for building things that are apps, but a lot of apps run on the web. So I really like it. And I think these kind of adaptations that we can do if we can figure it out, will just help it become more as a usable thing. For instance, like with Spotify, when I share a link to a track, I want the bot to be able to detect that link and show the cover art, and that's essentially what this can do if you configure it properly. Okay, so that's coming up on our hour here, or close enough. Source code is available. This is just I think we're in version 1 right now. That's the wrong thing. Pubspec.yaml. But yeah, just version 1. But this will be a growing project, and I'm happy with it right now. I'm sure, as I've done already, there'll be a lot of things that still get refactored. So if you're watching this video in the future and there's many commits since whatever the January 19th, 2022, there's a good chance some stuff has changed, and maybe it'll still make sense. Maybe everything will be different, and I'll just have to delete this video. But I don't think that'll be the case. I think I can, I think it'll still. I think the core principles in this is really what I'm enjoying, at least for 2022. Thanks for watching.